Hey there, welcome back to the Path to Zion podcast, where we are rediscovering the ancient way. Thank you so much for coming back for part 5 of our latest series that we have been doing. We're going to make this the final part and piece of this discussion we've been having for the last several weeks, which is what? The fact that Yahweh, Most High, He remembers His covenant. And we've been kind of basking in the beauty of that reality that Yahweh has always been a covenant keeper. He has never wavered on His promises to men. And because He's faithful to the utmost of what He would do, will do, is doing now, we can take a place of confidence and peace and trust in placing our hope and our expectations upon His immovable promises. And so as we have been discussing from the very beginning, back at the introduction of this series, our identity is of utmost importance, because if we do not understand who we are covenantally speaking, how will we understand any kind of fruit that comes from the covenant that Yahweh established with a people? And so whether we go all the way back to creation itself in Genesis chapter 1, or we go all the way to the other side, the end, in the book of Revelation, as far as the timeline of humanity and earth and heavens and all those things go, we see the pattern of covenant run right through the whole thing. And so without going over everything we've discussed, the previous part to this one, part 4, was briefly touching on one of many biblical examples that we've been given, just regular biblical records, of David and Mephibosheth. Now, Mephibosheth was, of course, Jonathan's son, and David goes and he makes a call out, is there anyone left from the house? And they say, well, there's this crippled man, Mephibosheth, and he's down in Lodabar, and, he's not doing too well these days. David calls for him, of course, brings him to the house. And what we highlighted in part 4 was the beauty of what we did in part 3. I believe it was part 3, talking about this is a covenant bigger than us. So we established the covenant bigger than us, and then we moved it to one biblical account, as small as it was, that we did, of that reality. This is something bigger than a mere individualistic me and Jesus salvation issue. This is something that is a covenant fact of something that preceded us, and we are inheritors of, should we respond to the call of the king, if we want to use that as a bit of a metaphor. So here we are now. We are culminating the whole series today. It's going to be lengthy compared to the other parts, I believe. I have a lot more content, but we will read probably 15 to 20 different Bible references here, verses. And we've titled this one, The Seed of Abraham and Yahweh's Great Name, because we kind of have an inception of sorts with the promises made to Abraham. Why? Without getting into all of that, because there was a law, there was Yahweh's Torah, which is just His instructions, His way to live, all the way back in the garden. If we don't believe that, or if we've missed that, we don't understand that first Adam and Eve rebelled and chose lawless behavior by breaking the instruction of Yahweh in the garden, and were banished, of course, because of it. And we see the curses immediately come in different forms and fashions, including the pattern that we saw and stated in the spirit of Cain through the original Cain. And so we go all the way to the back of the beginning of a covenant for an identifiable, set-apart people, where Yahweh said, you know what? I'm going to create a specific people, a specific family for my great name's sake, to covenantally join myself with. So whoever comes into this family will be a covenant part of what I'm doing. And so we saw that at its inception with Abraham, which is why we're going to talk about this in part 5. So we see this seed, this promise given to Abraham all the way back at the beginning of the book. And we see this pattern that goes throughout the ages that will culminate in a day that's yet before us still, where all of these things will transpire. All of these prophecies, all of these promises, all of the covenantal blessings and cursings will all come to a fulfillment age where Yahweh's great name will be the prevalent name above every other name, which is why we name this the covenant of the Most High. The Most High remembers his covenant. And so we're bridging all of time from the inception of the seed of Abraham, the promise given, to the exaltation of Yahweh's great name, where the only thing left, the only people that are left are his family, his covenantal family. A new heavens and a new earth, all the promises of New Jerusalem. And what goes forth from Zion? The Torah. It goes forth from Zion. And here, this is no happenstance or just poetic idea of the authors of the word. This is covenant language. So as we move on here to put a big bow on this thing, we're going to take a little while to do that. So let's remember that all of this leads us back to a covenant people that was promised, okay, a promised seed to Abraham. We also need to remember that Abraham was the first Hebrew, the first one to sojourn and cross over and move. This long predated the Jewish people. As we continue to highlight for just a general blanket approach to what we believe the scriptures speak to clearly about an identifiable people. It's not Jews or Christians, and you pick a side. Well, we're Christians because of when we were born. It is not that simple. It is not more complicated, but it is more ancient than that. Now, why does this matter? We've highlighted it a bit as we've talked about identity in this series, but many people have overlooked the biblical pattern of obedience to laws and commands pre-Mount Sinai. We have done a series on this, but Genesis chapter 26 verses 4 and 5 tells us some very important criteria as Yahweh speaks to Isaac, of course, the son of Abraham, about his side of the covenantal promise to Isaac's father. It says this, quote, "I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and give your descendants all these lands, and by your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed." Okay, now this is a wonderful thing to be told by the Creator, by the Most High, is it not? So Yahweh says, I'm going to multiply your descendants. I'm going to give them all of these lands. I'm going to bless the entirety of the earth, all the nations of the earth, because of these descendants. And we have to ask, well, why? Why, though? What did Isaac do? This goes to our point we've been making throughout this series. We're told, as we continue to read here in Genesis chapter 26, because Abraham obeyed me, because Abraham fulfilled his duty to me, because Abraham kept my commandments, because Abraham kept my statutes and laws. Okay? So Yahweh tells us, not you, not me, not our dispensational doctrines of modern Christian theology, why all these things took place. There were promises made to Abraham's seed that were reiterated to Isaac here, as we're reading in Genesis, that were all dependent and filtered through Yahweh's response to Abraham's obedience and keeping, shamer, Yahweh's commandments, statutes, and laws. So this obedience incited Yahweh to move, to enact, what? A wonderful covenant promise that he's explaining here to Isaac. So in light of this, here's the main challenge, and I'm asking this again on purpose. Who are you today? Who are you? Who are we as people? Are we just people in the body of Christ? Because that's thrown around and very generic and ironically so easy to meet the criteria of, I don't believe it fulfills the calling at all. I don't believe it's a proper identifier because, like, raise your hand if you're saved. Well, excuse me, but what does that mean to you and to her and to him and to all these other thousands of people? What does that mean to have Jesus in your heart? This is covenant language. Are we part of a people, or are we merely just born-again individuals that had personal encounters with Jesus that are all about us and him? You know, me and Jesus reality, as we have touched on again recently. Are we Abraham's children? Really? Are we his prophesied seed that we hear being spoken and reminded to Isaac? Are we part of that inheritance? Yeshua said that if we are, we will do the works that Abraham did. And I'm just saying, friend, people don't like this. Well, no, no, no. We draw all these lines of impossibility, but friend, there were signs like circumcision that were given to Abraham and that were passed on to his seed. Well, it's all about circumcision of the heart. It's not about the flesh. Well, then we miss the understanding of how Abraham and his seed got to the place of the physical. The physical example was simply an outside manifestation, reality of his heart's posture. He had already had the circumcision of the heart, friend. That came first. But because of the covenant, he responded with action, which again here, I hate having to repeat myself 15 times. Yeshua came against the non-believing teachers of the law because they said, don't you know about our father Abraham? And he said, look, man, if y'all were Abraham's children, you would do the righteous deeds that Abraham did. Likewise, our righteous works are evidence that we are in a covenant people. Covenant people do covenant things. Okay, I'm going to read this again. Our righteous works, our deeds, are evidence that we are a covenant people doing covenantal things, friend. That's what covenant is. You are marked. You are a people. Sabbath is what? Sabbath is a sign between Yahweh and his covenant people. It's a sign. I didn't say that. The word says that. It is a marker. It is a stamp. It is a seal that says, these are my covenant people. In an age right now that, don't get me started, anyone is a believer. Doesn't matter what you look like, where you go, what you do, what you dress like, how you talk, what you watch, what you eat. It just doesn't matter. Who am I to judge you, brother? That mentality, that Christian acceptance pattern would be entirely intolerable in this age of covenant that we're looking back upon that preceded us long, long ago, friend. Our righteous works are evidence that we're covenant people. These people, okay, Yahweh's set apart people, remember and memorialize what the covenant instituting creator put in place for his people. And we yield to it. As I've highlighted in this series already, I don't need to understand everything. Well, explain to me why Yahweh would not want. Friend, this is covenant stuff. He says no, I say yes, sir. Yes, Father. It's that simple. That could probably be a point that we highlight as well. Honoring the Creator, the Most High's covenant, because it's His will, is His way above mine. In simplicity, the covenant people do their covenantal part. We respond with obedience. And again, then we fulfill the pattern of Abraham. And many of us, would claim to be in the seed of Abraham. So as we move further into this conclusion of sorts, we see this highlighted pattern all throughout the scriptures. As in our Exodus text that we've been reading primarily every episode, Yahweh hears and responds to his covenant people, as we've talked about before. When we shavah, when we cry out for help to Yahweh, he is incited to remember his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he moves on our behalf because of something else, because of what he told Isaac, Abraham's son. Oh yeah, this is because your father obeyed me and kept my laws and statutes and commandments. I'm including you. I'm remembering you because of his obedience. It's awesome. It's incredible. What an invitation. So we're going to look back at some more examples here. We're going to read, 20 verses or so, starting in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 8 through 12. But because Yahweh loved you and kept the oath which he swore to your forefathers, Yahweh brought you out by a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that Yahweh your Elohim, he is Elohim, the faithful Elohim who keeps his covenant and his faithfulness to 1,000 generations. For who, though? For who? For those who love him? Yes, we love you, God. We love you, God. We love him. We love him, don't we? And keep his commandments. Real quick, this is worthy of our spending another second here. Because Yahweh loved you and kept the oath which he swore to your forefathers. He brought you out. He was your deliverer. He was your redeemer. He was your savior. Why? Because of the oath he already made, his covenantal oath with their forefathers. He is the one who keeps his covenant and his faithfulness to 1,000 generations for those who love him and keep his commandments. Verse 10. But he repays those who hate him to their faces to eliminate them. He will not hesitate towards him who hates him. He will repay him to his face. And let us continue to read to allow the word to continue to confirm what we're saying, so you don't think this has just been my personal opinion for the last hour and a half here. Verse 11. Therefore, okay, so because of these things, because of what we just read, quote, you shall keep the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments which I'm commanding you today to do them. So, to make our point scripturally and not just mere commentary, Yahweh says in Deuteronomy chapter 7, look, I'm making a commitment to you because of an oath that I swore to your forefathers. I'm bringing you out of the house of slavery. I'm being your deliverer. I'm being your rescuer because of a covenant I made that preceded you. And so therefore, this is our point to the utmost. We could stop right here, but we're not going to. Therefore, because I made a covenant with your fathers, and I'm keeping my oath to perfection, because of that, keep my commandments, statutes, and judgments, which I'm commanding you today. So we say all the time in this program and in real life, this is why we believe the commandments must be a primary part of our life. They must be a part of the whole of our foundation. Because Yahweh is saying now, because of the covenant I made that's bigger than you, as we called it earlier, with Father Abraham that would go through his seed, because of that, keep the commandments, statutes, and judgments. Because of my covenant action on your behalf. And to use our Mephibosheth point that we made in the last episode, you didn't earn this. You didn't deserve this. I am a perfect covenant-keeping Elohim, and I'm extending it to you to walk in the ways of your forefathers. In the writings of the prophet Micah, chapter 7, verses 18, 19, and 20, we read this. Who is an Elohim like you, pardoning iniquity, overlooking transgression? Okay, that's awesome. But for who? For who? For the remnant of his heritage. He will not retain his anger forever because he delights in mercy. He will again have compassion on us. Again, okay, they're remembering Father's pattern of compassion upon his covenantal people. He will subdue our iniquities, and you will cast all our sins into the depths of the sea. Verse 20, you will extend truth to Jacob, mercy to Abraham, that you swore to our ancestors from the days of old. I'm going to reference this again at the very end, but it's going to take us a while to get there, so I'm going to say it now as well in case we forget by then. One of the biggest flaws with the Christian doctrine most all of us have inherited is we don't do what this says right here in verse 20. We don't look back much to Yahweh's covenantal promises of old. We just don't really need those now. Listen, in my area here of the mountains of Appalachia, old-time religion is like from 1955. That's old-time doctrine and religion. Maybe the 1611 KJV, maybe. But friends, we don't go back far enough. I say that a lot. We don't go back far enough. This prophecy in Micah chapter 7 is reiterating a covenant promise. The remnant of Yahweh's heritage is who will be finding their transgressions overlooked, their iniquities pardoned, because of Yahweh's kindness towards the remnant of his heritage. And as we said in verse 20, he's going to extend truth. Why does it say to Jacob, mercy to Abraham, that you swore to our ancestors from the days of old? Friends, we have got to look back at the foundational covenant language of the word, or we will never, We were at a coffee shop a couple days ago, and there was a copy of the New Testament on the table. Now, yes and amen, there's anything that's the word of Elohim in a public place. Yes, I don't overlook that. But I'm just saying, like, if we start in Matthew chapter 1 and start others in Matthew chapter 1, there will be zero foundational understanding for what in the world is taking place when Messiah shows up on the scene. It will be entirely overlooked, missed, unknown. We have got to go back to what the writers of the Word and all of those many, many saints before us understood well that we have not inherited, which is there is a remnant of Yahweh's heritage that He remembers and moves on the behalf of that is within the seed of Abraham. Now, there is an ancient way to discover, friends. Of course, we know that. That's like the theme of our program. An old covenantal way that long preceded us all. We know the prophecies of Jeremiah. We've been saying them a lot lately. Stand at the crossroads, paraphrase, look left and look right. Ask for the ancient path, the good way, and then walk in it. We must look around, find it, identify it, and willingly choose to put our feet step after step after step upon it. We will not fall into this, friend. Throughout the Psalms, we see David speak in a way that if we have eyes to see, that we've been talking about, hopefully this will get our kind of antennas up towards this language moving forward. This highlights the pattern that I have been trying to examine and expose here in this series. So I want to encourage us to listen with ears to hear in regards to what we've been pointing out over the past several hours of this series as I read some verses I've extracted from the book of Psalms. We will start in chapter 4, verse 1. Answer me when I call, Elohim of my righteousness. You have relieved me in my distress. Be gracious to me. Hear my prayer. And David concludes this section with, redeem Israel, Elohim, from all his distress. So it's a personal, but it's an understanding of the familial, covenantal people of Yahweh. It's not just merely about David himself. He understands that there is something bigger than himself and includes that even in his cry out and in his prayer. Psalm 30, verse 10. Hear, Yahweh, and be gracious to me, Master. Be my helper. I put that in there because hear Yahweh, like we have been establishing in previous episodes in the series. Here, like we talked about with Shaval, may my cry for help ascend to your throne like the pattern of old, like your people in Egypt, suffering, slavery. Hear my cry, Yahweh. Be gracious to me, Master. Be my helper. Why? Because throughout your covenantal action on behalf of your people, I trust in you. I see, Father, this is what you do for your set-apart people. I know the biblical pattern of how you respond to your covenantal people. Yahweh, please remember your promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Remember your promise to Israel. Remember, oh Yahweh, your promise to our forefathers. Remember your heritage, Father. David understood that. We see that all throughout his writings. Chapter 61, verses 1 and 5. Hear my cry, Elohim. Give your attention to my prayer. From the end of the earth I call to you when my heart is faint. For you have heard my vows, Elohim. You've given me the inheritance of those who fear your name. So here we are as we're talking about this final part, the seed of Abraham and Yahweh's great name. David recognized and highlights our two main points right here. You've given me the inheritance of those who fear your name. A recognition of a lineage, a legacy, a heritage that preceded him, that he entered into covenantally, and he wanted to receive that. Remember, Yahweh, their promises, your inheritance-based promises to the seed of Abraham, to those who fear your name, your most high great name, Yahweh. Remember me because of those things, those covenantal promises that preceded me. Psalm 119, 145 through 152. I cried out with all my heart. Answer me, Master. I will comply with your statutes. I cried to you, save me, and I shall keep your testimonies. I rise before dawn and I cry for help. I shavah. I wait for your words. My eyes anticipate the night watches so that I may meditate on your word. Hear my voice according to your faithfulness. Revive me, Master, according to your judgments. Verse 150. Those who follow after wickedness approach. They're far from your Torah. You are near, Master, and all your commandments are truth. From long ago I have known, from your testimonies, that you have founded them forever. We could spend some time on this one. I cried out with all my heart. I shavah. I cried out for help to you, Yahweh. I'm meditating on your word. There are those that are pursuing me that are wicked, and they're far from your Torah. They're lawless ones. But you're near. Your commandments are truth. Long ago I've known your testimonies. You founded them forever. What's he saying? Covenant language, covenant language, covenant language. Remember me, Yahweh, in my distress. I shavah, cry out for help, because of what has preceded me that I have covenantally joined myself into, Yahweh. Remember your covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And by the way, because of that, hear my cry. May my shavah, my cry for help, ascend to your mighty, most high throne. Psalm 130, verses 1, 2, and 8. Out of the depths I have cried to you, Yahweh. Master, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the sound of my pleadings. And then verse 8 says this, He will redeem Israel from all guilty deeds. Here we are again. There were so many of these, I had to just pick like 10 of them. Personal, I'm crying out for help. I'm crying out in Shavah to Yahweh. I'm singing a song to Yahweh. Hear my voice. Let your ear be attentive to my sound, the sound of my pleadings. You, Yahweh, and he reminds himself, you, Yahweh, will redeem Israel from guilty deeds. Again, so I'm crying out personal, but Yahweh, there's something much bigger than just my distress here, right? There is a unified covenantal set-apart people understanding that, friend, I'm trying to plead with us to realize we have not inherited and we have not heard nor talked about in this belief system of Christianity that we have known. Psalm 98, verses 1 through 3, sing a new song to Yahweh. He's done wonderful things. His right hand and his holy arm have gained the victory for him. Yahweh has made his salvation known. He has revealed his righteousness in the sight of the nations. He has remembered his graciousness and his faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our Elohim. So sing a new song to Yahweh. He's done wonderful things. He's gained victory for him. He's recounting. This is what Yahweh does. He is the victor. He has been showing us a demonstration of his power throughout his people for generation after generation after generation. He's made his salvation. He's made his Yeshua known. That's why people get so offended at this, but that's why Yeshua, the son of Elohim, was no new idea in the middle of the book. People find that so offensive, but there is none like Yeshua. There's none like Messiah, in the sense that no man chose to perfectly walk obedient to the Father like the Son. Nobody chose to do that. I believe we all could. We choose not to. Yeshua willed himself via being the perfect, obedient Son of the Most High to overcome this body of flesh, which you and I do not. Therefore, he became the perfect pinnacle example of that, yes. But he was not the first example or the origination of Yahweh's salvation. That's why people who properly understood the coming of Messiah that we read about in the New Covenant, New Testament, that's what we see are people like who understood this generational covenantal Elohim always being Savior, always being a rescuer, always being a deliverer, always unifying his set-apart remnant people, his heritage that we've been talking about. He's always done that. So when Messiah, the prophesied Messiah, comes, fulfilling the text in Isaiah and so many other places, people who saw, who had the eyes to see, recognized this is another extension of Yahweh's wonderful covenantal rescue plan through the prophesied Son, through the prophesied Messiah. It was no new revelation. It was a experiential reality that the prophesied moment had come. It was no new idea. It was no, wow, salvation has come to the Jews. Friend, this was what Yahweh has always been doing. He's always been inviting his people through his salvation covenant, his deliverance, his removing of the slavery of our life. So we see this wonderful pattern throughout the Word of people who again understood and remembered what we have not inherited and really grasped an understanding towards, which is this is an ancient covenant, and this is Yahweh's storyline unfolding this ancient covenant all along the way, step by prophesied step, friend. This is not just some new whim idea where the Creator decided to come and rescue his people from sin. We are trying to establish that the Most High remembers his covenant. And in this case, it comes through the seed of Abraham for his great name's sake. Now, in our Bibles, men like David specifically called out unto Yahweh by name. We have to touch on this while we're here. Other righteous men had always preserved a heritage of called out people that declared the mighty name of the Most High. Now, interestingly, all biblical generations always look back and use the name of Yahweh and the acts of Yahweh at Mount Sinai or at the Red Sea or at the burning bush or at creation or with Noah. And there was a specificity to who in the world we're talking about. We've talked about this over so many years here that if you went back in time to Noah's day or to Abraham's day, or even probably to the days of Shaul, Paul, surely, and even in Yeshua's as well, if you just said you worshiped God, people would say, well, who in the world are you talking about? We've got thousands of gods here. But if you said, I worship the God, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, okay, we know who you are and who you're talking about. Friends, we have not inherited that here today. We have inherited a belief system that says his name doesn't matter, distinction doesn't matter. As I've said in past videos before, we record the name of Dagon and of Baal and all these other false gods, but the Elohim God of the entire creation of heavens and earth, well, he's just God now. His name has been discarded as insignificant. But friend, we're talking about a promise to Abraham's seed and the culmination of everything, which is an exaltation of Yahweh's great name. This is the Most High, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we choose to stand on his covenantal promises that long preceded us, right? So although I'm in no way promoting that you have to recite certain words or names in some perfect order and voice fluctuation in order to be heard by the Creator, we've got to be careful that we don't move out of the scriptural patterns that we've been given, which is, I cry out to you, Yahweh. The name. We've done that before. There's no time and place for this in this study as well. The importance of his name. It is an integral part of this because we're striving to be an identifiable, set apart, holy, consecrated people that exalt his great name, that everything that's even done to me, in me, about me, in my personal life is not just to make me better or not just to get me to heaven, which I don't even believe I'm going there. It's not for that. It is for his name's sake. This is all for the glory of his great name. Any reward I get, any kind of blessing I get out of it at all is all just out of his goodness and kindness and just absolutely mind-blowing compassion towards us, friend. But this is about his namesake, and I tell people all the time, if you're not okay with moving you out of the picture and making this all about Yahweh, then you're going to have a hard time accepting the biblical gospel. Because this is not about getting you born again and you free from drugs and getting you off of cigarettes and you off. Friend, this is way bigger than that. I'm not saying that Yahweh doesn't set us free. I could spend an hour talking about just one of those things myself. Yes and amen. But all of this is to point to his great name's sake. Yes, may we have a testimony. I'm not saying we shouldn't have one. But I'm saying all of it must be unto the glorification of the Most High and not ourselves. Like Mephibosheth. King, don't you know, King, I'm a dead dog. I'm nothing but dirt. I don't even deserve to sit under your table, let alone in a chair, in a seat beside you at it. Friends, I'm telling you again, as sure as I'm sitting here, this will mark people in a coming age of being Yahweh's remnant covenant people and Yahweh's cocky, Jesus lives in my heart, look at who I am because of I'm a Christian American people. That divide is coming, friend. I'm telling you every day I feel like it's just swelling. This will mark us, friend, about those who say, this is about a covenant that's so much bigger than me. This isn't about me. This isn't about you. This is about my Father's great name. I need to talk more about that, and I desire all of us to maybe consider talking about that more as we share about what in the world we're doing here. Why are we here today? For his great name's sake, that's why. The Hebrew word used here is, we've talked about this before, this word hara, which is cry out, which is kind of a neighbor, you could say, of Shavah. In so many cases when David is crying out, it's crying out to Yahweh by name. Just like I told you, I believe in my studies revealed that Shavah was. The Hebrews were crying out in their distress and slavery to the Egyptians. They're crying out for help to Yahweh, the covenant-keeping Creator, whom they remembered. Of course, they remembered how He delivered them through so many different things and all the promises that preceded them. They, as we highlighted at the very beginning, I am firmly convinced that some of them remembered the prophecy that came to Abraham that said, look, your offspring, your seed, they're going to be enslaved. They're going to go through these generations of persecution and slavery, but I'm going to set them free. I promise. I covenantally promise you, I'm going to deliver them. They're going to turn to me. I believe these people knew this is the covenant with our father Abraham. And we believe the best that they could. We believe it will come to pass. And of course it did. Yahweh was not slow to bringing about his promise. And in a general sense, we may start out. I did for how many years of my life? I just called God, God. I just called him God. That didn't mean I didn't know him. But as my intimacy with him grew and my love for the word and my response to what was being revealed to me through my wife and other people, I cried out to Yahweh and I said, I want to know you as a father. I want to know your name. I want to walk as a well-pleasing son as my relationship became more personal with my father. I called him by his name that he revealed so many years ago to who? To his covenantal people. No coincidence. It's here where we find the key to Yahweh hearing the cries of his people, friend. It's here where I've been parked for weeks now as we've moved through this study, diving deeper into the importance of the covenant and how Father responds to and moves on the behalf of, move to action on the behalf of those who cry out to Yahweh by name in the pattern and heritage and legacy of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Friends, I'm telling you, even as I do this last part here, I feel something settling in me that's just different. It's just changing in me. I hope that we have these moments as we study the Word and give ourselves free from our dispensational Christian upbringing doctrine that is like breathing air, that we exhale too. We exhale too. And why? Because it's necessary to bring in the new things that Yahweh wants to open our eyes to see, for me, and perhaps for you, in greater measure, the understanding of these ancient covenantal promises from a covenantal King, our Creator. So, some questions as we shut the door on this in a few minutes here. Do you cry out to Yahweh with a proper understanding of his ancient covenant? Do you just close your eyes and ask God to help you? Do you just ask God generically to like give you strength and like bless your food and, you know, give me a good day today? And I mean, I'm asking, I'm not being sarcastic. Like, I mean, I remember those days. Thankfully, it's been a long time now, but I remember. And I'm not saying we don't start somewhere, but sometimes I'm talking to people who claim to have been walking with Yahweh for 40, 50 years and still call him God and will not tolerate the consideration of speaking his name. That's kind of where I'm going with this. I would say that a true relationship with Yahweh is revealed in the intimacy of beginning to better understand who he has always been to the people that he has dealt with that preceded us. Gets our mind off of us and all the stuff we get and all the stuff we are now. And, you know, we're priests and kings and prophets, and everybody wants to give a prophecy today, and everybody wants to run to the mall and start a deliverance ministry, and everybody wants to give you a book and say, read this book about a move of God at a college campus. And I'm just like, those things are fine, friend, but I feel like we're still in kindergarten towards the foundational things. And so all that's fine, and people can do that, and there's many worlds and options and presentations for everyone. But for our house and for anyone who would give me 5 minutes on this program or in real life, I would say perhaps we need to turn back a little bit to the ancient path, and we need to look at the promises that we have been ignorant to, I would say, in fullness and in true purpose for far too long. Not just historical biblical understanding because we read a giant, illustrated Old Testament when we were 8. I'm talking about a true, mature understanding of inheriting a covenantal promise from the Creator. So, do you speak to Yahweh as a dear, intimate Father whose name is regularly upon your lips, like David? Do you read the Psalms of David and think, that's kind of how I speak to the Father? I think it's a good template for us in many ways. I hope that you do. I hope that all of us do in greater measure. I could do it better. I don't have any shame in saying that. I do things incrementally better than I used to, and I have a long way to go as well. That's okay to say. Doesn't nullify our journey. If you don't, just consider crying out unto Yahweh by name, friend, like so many saints who went before you did. Just try it. Speak his name on your mouth, on your lips. Cry out, Shavah, unto Yahweh. When we do that, friend, we are entering into an ancient pattern that righteous men set before us that shows us this is who Yahweh hears. That's all the way back to the beginning of this. Yahweh heard. He responded as that cry for help ascended to his throne. He heard. He looked upon them. He responded. He moved on their behalf because of a covenant he made with Abraham. Okay? Psalm 91, 14, 15, and 16. Because he has loved me, remember, those who love me keep my commandments, is what Yahweh said. So because he's loved me, which means you also keep his commandments, because Yahweh said that's how you love him. Because of this, I will save him. I will set him securely on high, because he has known my name. He will call upon me, and I will answer him. I will answer him, okay? Let's just be specific. I will answer the one who calls upon me because he's known my name. I'll save that one. That's why I'm saying these things. When people say his name doesn't matter, he knows who I'm talking to. I'm not trying to be silly, but friend, filter that through Psalm 91. Yahweh will respond and answer the one who calls upon him by name. That's enough for me. I'm in. I'll call him Yahweh all day long now. Should be that simple if we're humble. I'll be with him, that one who knows my name, in his trouble. I'll rescue him. I'll honor him. I'll satisfy him with a long life and show him my Yeshua, my salvation. Friend, this is covenant. This is covenant. Someone who knows his name, knows his character, knows his covenantal character. Psalm chapter 50, 15 through 17. We're going to read this backwards so that it ends well, okay? You'll understand as I get through it here. This is 16 and 17, and then we'll read 15. To the wicked, Elohim says, what right do you have to tell of my statutes and to take my covenant in your mouth? For you yourself hate discipline, and you throw my words behind you. Friend, boy, we could park here too, couldn't we? We could talk about the Bible until, I don't know, this time tomorrow. So to the wicked man, Elohim says, what right do you have to tell of my statutes and take my covenant in your mouth? You yourself hate discipline, and you throw my words behind you. Now, verse 15, well, this is the one we like to say and post on our bumpers on a beautiful sticker with butterflies. Call upon me on the day of trouble. I will rescue you, and you will honor me. So call upon me, it's probably Korah. On the day of trouble, I'm going to rescue you, and you will honor me. And then it goes, oh, and by the way, you wicked man who hates discipline and throws my words behind you, what right do you have to speak of my statutes and take my covenant in your mouth? In other words, that's not for you, friend. Move along. That's not for you, wicked, idolatrous, lawless, outside of covenant one. That my covenant, you get that out of your mouth. That's not for you, right? I think that's what it says. All right, we are moving to an absolute conclusion. We're going to read Exodus 32 right before the golden calf incident that we all know pretty well, right? We see Moses, he's crying out to Yahweh to remember something much bigger than the Israelite people. What's he remind him of? His covenant. Moses this is why there's such wonderful imagery between Moses and Yeshua the Son. I think that this is part of Messiah's mediator function as a great high priest, is to bring a service before Yahweh, which includes, look, remember your covenant. How many times when the Father looks upon me and I am ready to receive his full wrath for my disobedience, and the Son says, whoa, Father, remember your covenant. Remember. This is bigger than Joel. This is bigger than him. This is bigger than Ronnie. This is bigger than Noah. This is bigger than them. This is about your great namesake, Father. Show them mercy because you're full of mercy. Remember, I'm not going to go into a dialogue between the Father and the Son, but I'm seeing all these things in my imagination. It's a beautiful thing, covenant, isn't it? It's swelling up in me as I talk about it. It's growing. It's like a sponge in there getting full. So right before the golden calf incident, I got distracted. We see Moses crying out to Yahweh to remind him, Father, remember, Yahweh, remember your covenant. We read this, Yahweh, remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants to whom you swore by yourself. Oh boy, is that a key. We don't have time for all of this. And you said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heavens, and all this land of which I have spoken I will give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. Verse 14. Yahweh relented of the harm which he said he would do to his people. Friends, this is the gospel right here. Do you know that? Do you understand that? This is the gospel right here. Yahweh looks at humanity, and he looks for a covenant people who have joined themselves into the ancient promises through the seed of Abraham, that are ones who are willing to lay down their life for the sake of the Son. He looks upon these and he says, you know what? They deserve my wrath. They deserve my judgment. They deserve. But I am choosing to remember the covenant that I made with Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. He chooses, friend, to remember that. Okay? He chooses to. Which is why when people talk about how, whether you talk about just God in an atheistic sense about how could you How could you care about this God who's so angry and evil and mean? And people, even Christians today, talk about Jesus came because nobody could stand in the presence of a terrifyingly awful, God of the Old Covenant, Old Testament. Friends, I would say this. We don't know Yahweh then. Both cases, they don't know Yahweh. They don't understand the covenant-keeping Most High. It's that simple. We need to hold that very tenderly as we consider Yahweh's compassion and his endless patience with all of us individually and corporately with his set-apart people. Endless patience. So because of this, Yahweh's told by Moses, remember, Father, remember. I know, Father, remember. And I'm just picturing this, and then Moses comes down and he sees them worshiping the golden calf. Man, it's no wonder he lost his mind. It's no wonder, y'all, because he's standing there interceding for these people, pleading with the Creator who could just, by the snap of his finger or the thought in his mind, wipe out all of them in a millisecond's time. Moses is interceding to them, for them, to Yahweh. Not convincing Yahweh like we convince one another about what to order at a coffee bar, but he's mediating with the Father, saying, remember your covenant, Yahweh. Remember what you promised. Just remember that. And what? And we just read. And so Yahweh relented of the harm which he would do to his people that they deserve now. Moses goes down, and what in the world are they doing? If we don't see Yahweh's compassion in this, we'll never see it. I want to talk about this for 4 more hours. Can I do that? We've got to move on. So fast forward all the way to the end of the Old Testament writings, and this is literally, we're going to be done here in 3 minutes. You're going to find the entire Old Covenant now. What we call the Old Covenant, Old Testament writings, okay? We see them get wrapped up with a prophecy from Yahweh. Please pay attention if you are struggling to at this point. Now, most of us have heard the last 2 verses in many a Christian gathering. It states this, behold, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of Yahweh. He will turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, so that I will not come and strike the land with complete destruction. We have heard that how many times? Oh, the prophets, the prophets, the prophets. Elijah, the spirit of Elijah, the spirit of Elijah. Okay. But right before this, at the end of the Old Covenant, Old Testament writings, the third from the last verse of the entire Old Testament, we read Yahweh speaking the following. Remember the law of Moses, my servant, the statutes, ordinances, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. Now, why do I read that right here at the very end of all this? Covenantal language for a covenantal people. If Yahweh knew and orchestrated that book to be placed where it was to launch us into the arrival of Yeshua the Messiah in Matthew chapter 1, if that's the way Father ordered it, nonetheless, that's how we've got it, so we have to believe he ordained it to be so and is fully aware. Yahweh made it clear to remember the law of Moses, my servant, the statutes and ordinances which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. And again, why? You're fixing to move into a new era of the timeline of my works among men. I want you to remember covenant language for a covenant people. Friends, if you want to be a covenant people, this is how you live. Again, Sabbath is a sign. Circumcision is a sign, a marker. There are markers and signs, friend, that Yahweh gave us, not you or I or a certain sect of religion. Well, I can tell you're this type of Mennonite because the way your beard's cut. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about thus says Yahweh for all generations. That's what I'm talking about. Yahweh set apart people remember the generational works of his hands, and they call out to him for help. They shavah, based upon his covenantal response throughout the ages. What we see in this biblical pattern that we have gone over now for over 2 hours in this series is to establish that a covenant people today understand and respond to what we experience here today in our lives in 2025 and beyond through the lens of how Yahweh has always dealt with a covenantal people throughout all of history. He is a covenant-keeping creator. If we do not understand covenant, friend, as we come into the faith, as we share our faith, as we invite people into receiving the gospel, if we do not foundationally understand the power of being a covenant remnant people, an inheritance, friend, we are handing someone an empty gospel that will not sufficiently help them understand anything beyond a personal acceptance of Jesus in their heart, which is not the gospel. Okay? Yahweh hears the cries of his people, and it prompts him to remember, as we just finished with our text here. His covenant, as we've said, is bigger than us all. So friends, praise be to what? The name of the Most High, Yahweh, who remembers his covenant. You've been watching the Path to Zion podcast. We are rediscovering the ancient way. Thank you for sticking around for this entire series. Who knows what we're going to talk about next? I'm kind of stoked. Maybe we'll talk about this some more. Thank you so much for watching. Send us an email at pathtozionpodcast@gmail.com. Join into the conversation if you would like. Thank you for watching. Amen.